guys, it's Lindy.
And it's Mike here, and this is TIY,
the Tiny It Yourself channel, and today we will be showing you how we are doing our cedar trim.
So we're going to be using a spar urethane finish, and we're going to show you how to cut them to length and install them.
Mikey will be doing all of the actual chemical sealant, since I have a chemical sensitivity and things like that give me really bad hives. And let us know down below if you actually want a future video talking about building with green materials for people with chemical sensitivity, since we will be using low VOC and non-toxic stuff, at least on the inside of our house. So yeah,
all right, let's get to it. All right, so we are going to be staining or finishing our exterior cedar trim with spar urethane. Apparently it's better for hot and cold fluctuations than your normal polyurethane, so that's why it's better for outdoor or exterior wood purposes. And we're using a real brush instead of a foam brush, which I've seen a lot of people use because allegedly it can lead to some bubbles. Who knows? So we're gonna go ahead and do our first coat on here. You wanna make sure that you have a clean surface, dry surface. Okay, so according to the company, you're supposed to really make sure you saturate the end, and then you're supposed to work back toward that from here. Honestly, I don't know if it makes a difference, but that's what they say you're supposed to do. Work back like that. And then I try to get the sides at the same time, because otherwise you get these really nasty drip marks. I also really quickly want to mention something that took me a while to figure out. I was trying to figure out what type of sort of gloss level I was going to get with these Hellmann's products. And I went ahead and I bought a clear satin initially, thinking it was going to have a little bit of a shine, kind of like a satin paint would. But no, this came out at least completely matte for me. And then I moved up to a clear semi-gloss, which had a very light gloss even after a few coats. So this is what we decided to go with in the end. So once the top is cured after a few hours, you can flip it over and start on the second side. In our case, we have this 1x4 cedar trim, which is smooth on one side and rough on the other side. And the rough side likes to suck up finish just basically like a sponge. And so we can really go at it. We probably used 2/3 of this stuff on the back. Okay, so then you're supposed to wait at least 4 hours before the second coat, and then you're supposed to lightly sand it with a 220 grit sandpaper. We only have a 120 grit sandpaper on hand, which I've been using and is totally fine. And so you just sort of scruff it up, and the reason you do that is to make sure that the second coat really adheres. So you see a sort of weird sort of fogginess that starts appearing, and I think that's what you're looking for. Now, if you're like me, you might be wondering, do I really need to sand in between coats? And I actually decided to not sand in between one to find out what would happen. And I came back and there was just a light layer of powder on top, sort of like powdered sugar from that coat. And I'm not sure if it was because it was in the 30s, it was pretty cold that day, or if it was because I didn't sand, but now I sand every time. Lesson learned. All right, now that the sanding is complete, I'm gonna go ahead and do a light second coat. And don't forget to sand your sides and give them another coat as well. And then the company recommends doing 3 coats if you're going to do this as an exterior application. And so you get to go ahead and do that process over again, sanding it after 4 hours and then coating it again. All right, so this is the result after 3 coats. You can see we get a little bit of a shine. I don't know if you can see it very well, maybe right in there. Sort of a very light gloss, but mostly a sort of satin look. Now, if you're like us and you have several hundred feet of this trim to do, you want to get it done as fast as possible. It's good to set up a system kind of like we did. We got our sawhorse to set up and put as many as we could on each sawhorse, and then just went through, did the first coat, did the bottom, sanded it, did the second coat, etc. All right, so before I put the cedar trim on, I want to mention a couple things we're doing. One thing we're doing a little bit differently. A lot of trim is put on where you have a longer piece on top, one that overhangs on each side, and the same on the bottom. But we're just going to do one of those on the top, and then we're going to do our side pieces going with a 3.5-inch overlap on the bottom, and then the bottom piece will be the same width as the window, and apparently that just helps with moisture. There's less of a crack here for moisture to get into.
Okay, so now we're going to show you how we calculated a trim. Since how we're doing it is that the top piece is going to extend past the window 7 inches, 3.5 on each side, and that's just because our trim width is 3.5 inches, so it has to lay over the window by that amount. Then we'll have these 2 side flanking pieces, and they will go down past this window, also 3.5 inches. And then our bottom piece will sit in between those 2 side ones, and that will be the same length as our window is on either side.
And then I'm also going to be using these GRK trim screws. So apparently stainless steel is better according to the company, but you can use these with cedar and just seal them after you put them on, and that way the tannins won't leak and create streaks and stuff like that. But stainless steel, I guess, won't react at all, so that's better. And just so you can really see, this is one of the screws that we're using. It's a trim screw. It has that small head so that it does not make a big hole in the trim. And I'm going to start off with this bottom piece. I'm going to tack 2 on each side, and I'm not going to go too close to the end because when you get, within the last 1.5 inches of the end, it has a tendency to split. So I'll probably stay back closer around here. Okay, so I have already tacked these screws in just a little bit, and that way I don't have to do it on a horizontal wall, which is really annoying. And so I'm just going to line it up perfectly here. And go for it. Try not to sink them in too deeply, just to make sure they get a good bite. Otherwise, it could split the wood. And I'm going to go ahead and add another one right here, and I want to make sure I have most of my screws at least right around the rim where the frame is, because we have that about 1.5 inch frame all the way around, so we can sink right into that. Now that was pretty random, but you might be wondering, what is the actual correct spacing between screws? And depending on what you want to do, a lot of people go 16 inches on center just to match their studs, and they might do 2 paired together right on top of each stud. This metal framing configuration is a little bit unconventional. On our long walls, our studs are actually 24 inches on center, so I'll match that. But then on the front, I want to beef it up a ton because that is where all of the wind is going to come when we're hauling this thing on the road. So I might do a 24 inch on center double and then a single at 12 inches. We'll see how we feel. Okay, annoying situation. I just hit one of the screws that is attaching the window, and it's not going any further, and I'm gonna have to move it over, and it's gonna look bad. Trying to change the angle and seeing if that works. That worked. So I just changed the angle that I went in, and that way I did not have to create a second hole, which would have looked bad. And you may be wondering how that screw was able to do that, to go through the trim and the OSB and the metal, and that's because it has this sort of quick start, sort of piercing end, and it's just a nice, just good screw, really. All right, I'm back at it again. It's another day, and I want to look at a little detail, a little imperfection that you may have noticed while watching that last part, and that can be perfectly illustrated right here. See how we have it completely flush up here, and then we just a 1/4 of an inch gap down here. That's just not good, and that's a result of having that nailing flange along the edge of here, and then those screw heads, and having that wood sit on top of that. So the solution that I'm going to try is just taking little blocks, little shims, backing out this row of screws a little bit, shoving these in, and seeing where we get. Now I can pull it a little off. All right, now I have my trusty little shim here, and I'm just going to shove that guy in there. And it makes it most of the way pretty easily, but I'm gonna take a little extra piece of thicker shim and my hammer and hammer it the rest of the way. All right, now we are essentially perfect there. So here's the one I just did, looking way better now. And here's the next one that I need to do. You can still see majorly needs a shim. All right, I just popped a shim in there and it wasn't quite enough, so I'm going thicker on this one. All right, now I'm going to go through and do the same process for all of the sort of crooked edges. So overall, you can see the corners look way more even, way more natural. And so I'm just going to do the same process starting at the beginning for all the other windows. All right, now for the last step, I'm going to do some clear silicone caulking. This is an outdoor general sealant. All right, so here is the finished product. I think it's looking a lot better, and we've got those screw holes all caulked up so they are not going to create those nasty drip lines from the cedar tannins. And there it is. All right, before I finish up the video, here is some progress we've made recently. We put those top pieces on, but honestly, they're basically the same situation. It's just a 1x6 instead. And we got a couple more windows done here. This middle piece here, by the way, was a 1x6 that we had to cut down to about 4.5 inches, in case you're wondering. All right, so that's it for today. Feel free to like this video, subscribe, check us out on Instagram at TinyItYourself. And in our next video, we'll probably go back into the studio to talk about 5 or so other cool ways to do something cool in your tiny house, like the bathtub video. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.